Recorded Books and One Click Digital present A Texas Hill Country Christmas by William W. Johnstone with J.A. Johnstone. Narrated by Jack Garrett. Prologue. Fredericksburg, Texas, Christmas Eve, 1975. It was a rare day for this part of Texas. Snow covered the hill country. Only a couple of inches, true, but it was enough to lay a white mantle over the rugged countryside. The snow and the thick growth of evergreens made it look more like a picturesque scene from New England or some old Currier and Ives print than Central Texas. Having a white Christmas in these parts wasn't unheard of, but it was uncommon. Helen Severs thought it was beautiful as she stood at the picture window in the living room of the rambling ranch house and looked out. In the distance, she saw the dark, looming, humped shape of Enchanted Rock. A lot of people thought of it as gloomy and forbidding, but not Helen. She had been born in Fredericksburg 70 years earlier, and raised on various ranches in the area, so to her, Enchanted Rock was just part of her home. She remembered climbing to the top of it many, many times over the years. To a wild tomboy like her, who could rope and ride as well as any of the boys she grew up with, exploring it had been as natural as breathing. The first time she had stood atop Enchanted Rock and looked around at the magnificent scenery, her last name had been Jensen. She had been born a Jensen, and would always be one, no matter how much she had loved her late husband Gerald. Christmas carols played softly on the radio in the big mahogany home entertainment center that sat on one side of the living room. The sound was nice, especially blended as it was with the voices of Helen's children and grandchildren, laughing and talking as they always did at these family get-togethers. Luckily, the snow hadn't been bad enough to make travel dangerous, so the kids had been able to come in from Austin, Brownwood, Fort Worth, and Tyler. Once again, the ranch house was full, and Helen liked it that way. She turned away from the window as the sunlight faded outside. It got dark early this time of year. Helen's daughter-in-law, Jenny, came in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on the apron she wore, and said, "Dinner will be ready soon, Mom." Helen was glad Jenny called her that. But then most folks tended to call her Mom, whether she was related to them or not. That was just the sort of woman she was. She smiled and said, "I wouldn't have minded helping, you know." "Oh, I know that," Jenny said with a wave of her hand. "But you deserve to take one day off from taking care of everybody, don't you? One day a year." "I suppose so. I was raised to work, though." That was true of just about everyone in her generation. "You've worked plenty, and you will again. Why don't you sit down and take it easy?" Helen managed not to say, "Humph." Taking it easy didn't come natural to her. But as she sat down in her recliner, 6 of her grandchildren came running into the living room. Ranging in age from 7 to 12, they were a veritable stampede. Helen motioned for them to slow down and then sit down, and they settled cross-legged on the carpeted floor in a semicircle around her. "Tell us a story," one of the girls said. "About the old days," one of the boys added. "You mean when I was a little girl?" Helen asked with a smile. The boy shook his head and said, "No, before that. The old, old days, when there were still gunfighters and outlaws and Indians in Texas." "There are still Indians in Texas," Helen pointed out. "Many of them, and they're fine people." "What about gunfighters and outlaws?" another girl asked. "Are they still around, too?" "I suppose there will always be outlaws," Helen said. "Not so many gunfighters, though. Not like Smoke Jensen." "Was he our grandfather?" the boy asked. "No, He was my great-grand...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.